Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Concussion Nurse Podcast. I am your host, Natasha Wilch, and I am thrilled to be here with you today. This is a topic that comes up a lot, and it actually just came up in our mini school conversation recently again, and I've had messages asking us to do this episode. So we're going to be talking about exercise with persistent concussion symptoms. So we did an episode way back when in the beginning about exercise with acute concussion and how you start to introduce that. And so in this episode, we're going to talk about persistent concussion because in truth, still, when you look at the research, some of the best value is in being able to exercise. However, it's not as simple in many people's cases of going out and going for a 20-minute walk. And the common advice that gets given in this area and in this domain is you need to exercise. This is what the research shows us. Go for a 20-minute walk every day. And people do. And they feel like they've been hit by a Mack truck and it feels terrible. So we want to talk about today how we, yes, can do exercise and can move into movement with success that you can build upon so that you can continue moving forward towards your goals. So I'm going to reference a previous podcast. I'm going to give you some context. So if you're somebody that has tried to increase exercise in your life, and every time you've tried, or more consistently than not when you've tried, you've blasted yourself into a flare-up because you weren't sure how much to do or how to push or how to go about it. And so that even just the thought of exercising starts to flare symptoms, then this is problematic. Because ultimately what's now happened is the brain's been like, okay, you're thinking of exercise. Every time we do this, we feel gross. So I'm going to make you feel gross beforehand. You will hear this referred to as negative neuroplasticity. You'll hear it referred to as pain sensitization, a sensitized nervous system. There's all these different phrases. So if you're somebody that even just the thought of going to exercise increases your symptoms, then I would like you to pause this episode and go back to, or do it after, the episode where we talk about changing the relationship with your symptoms. Because when you think about doing something and symptoms start to increase, that is not due to the activity. Okay? And so this is where we have this really fine line of, yes, we need to have symptoms guide us, but they also can't dictate. Okay? This is important. Because if you go to even think about doing the exercise and you already feel your symptoms increase and you're like, oh, I can't do it, then it is this negative loop and we don't want that. Okay? So if that is something that you experience, go back and check out that podcast episode. Now, most people don't exercise or have trouble exercising after in the persistent concussion stage because it significantly flares their symptoms. And you're not given a ton of guidelines on what to do to navigate that. So rule of thumb, big rule of thumb, but rule of thumb is that in this task of exercise, your symptoms are allowed to increase by 2 to 3 points. Okay, so in worsening symptoms is an increase in point, appearing of new symptoms is an added point, and you are allowed to let them increase by 2 to 3 points in a session. Now, if all you're doing while you're exercising is focusing on your symptoms, they're going to increase fairly quickly because what we focus on happens. And so if you're thinking, if you're going to I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to check in and need to, how are my symptoms? 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 Oh my gosh, I have a headache. Oh my gosh, my pressure is increasing. How are my symptoms? How are my symptoms? You're going to increase by 2 to 3 points super fast. So what we want to do is check-ins, not hypervigilance. Okay. So also, when it comes to exercise, we need to choose our activity appropriately. What do I mean by this? If you are somebody who is struggling with a lot of vestibular issues, for example, going to walk on uneven trails with different light filtering through trees may not be your best choice. Now, this really depends on how you look at things. That going to walk on trails on uneven ground will A, yes, get your heart rate up, and yes, challenge your vestibular system. Maybe that's a good thing for you because you love being outside and you feel that that's great. The flip of it is if our goal is to be increasing our heart rate to hopefully increase our tolerance to then in turn increase blood flow to our brain, then perhaps let's choose an activity that normalizes or stabilizes our environment so it doesn't trigger our other symptoms that we're working through. So maybe if the goal is that heart rate and that cardiovascular aerobic component, we choose something like a stationary bike where we know the vestibular system is kind of like nullified, right? Versus going for a walk outside, right? So again, there isn't a wrong choice, but it is a what is the reason behind the choice you make. So sometimes for clients, we'll say, you know, we're going to do 3 days a week of the bike, really focused on that and that heart rate. And we know we're going to push that. And then just know that when you go for your walk outside, because this person loves being outside, you might not be able to get your heart rate up as high because there's also these other things that are factoring into your nervous system at the moment. And so you might feel symptomatic a little bit before the heart rate you can achieve on the bike. And just know that that makes sense. Okay. So choosing your activity is important. If you are somebody who's struggling with POTS, if you are somebody who's struggling with tachycardia, so you might not have POTS, but you might have some tachycardia, which means you have a rapid heart rate. If you are somebody that's really struggling with just being upright against gravity for whatever reason, then doing things like walking and running wouldn't be your first course of action, especially if you're just starting to get back into exercise. That would be something that you work towards, but you would want to start with something that was either horizontal in nature or reclined or potentially upright, depending on how your nervous system responds to gravity. So horizontal, is there something like Pilates that might work, right? There's some Pilates exercises and some Pilates classes that 100% can shoot that heart rate up. Do you like being in the water? Could you get in the pool? Depending on the type of environment, we have some pools here that you wouldn't want to go to. And then we have some pools that are like really kind of private and like quiet. Do you want to be in a pool and use like a kick pad to help support you, but then you're horizontal and you're starting to build cardiovascular endurance? Are you somebody who wants to actually go in a pool but do more water walking because of the effect of the water on your lower extremities? You don't have the same heart rate response and it helps with returning blood flow. Are you someone that can sit on a recumbent bike and do it that way? Are you someone that might not have a ton of vestibular issues or can tolerate it well? So you might like a rower because it has that linear aspect to it, right? So choosing the activity is important. Are you somebody that really would prefer to walk on a treadmill or run outside or run on a track? Okay. So it's not that there's necessarily a bad choice. There might be better choices, or there might be, sure, we can do that, but we just also have to factor in these other components. So now what do we do? So we've chosen our activity and now we actually want to exercise, and everyone just tells you 20 minutes, go. I'm going to highly recommend against that. And again, this is where we're going to respect our symptoms, but not hyper-focus on our symptoms. So before you do the activity, you're going to do whatever it is. Say we're going to do the bike because it's easy. You're going to take a breath. You're just going to ground. And you're literally going to check in. How do I feel? I'm a 3 out of 10. Okay. And by check in, I mean like literally check in. How's my body feel? 3 out of 10. Great. Do not start sitting there going, how's my head? How's my neck? How's my shoulder? Like, you will increase symptoms. Closing your eyes, taking a breath, quick check-in. How do I feel? Where are my symptoms? Instinctively, what comes to you, that is your number. Stop thinking about them. Now, instead, we're going to start to do our activity. So we're on the bike. We're just going to get a nice slow pedal. We're going to breathe. We're going to control our breath. We're going to enjoy that moment, whether you're looking at something, maybe you're listening to something, maybe your eyes are closed, maybe you're breathing, whatever it is. You can do one of two things. You can try and maintain that slow steady pace, whatever it is. So whatever, you'd have a 5-minute warm-up, ideally, and then you would have a heart rate goal. So if this is the first time you've ever exercised, or you're trying to get back into it and you haven't done this in a while, I'm going to give you what I would do at home if I was listening to this podcast versus going to a physio clinic. Okay. So 2 options. If I were at home and I hadn't done this for a while, I would just set my first day at going for my target heart rate at 50% of my heart rate max. So I'm 41 years old. So 220 minus 41 gives me my heart rate max. And then my first target rate is 50% of that number. Y'all, that might mean you're just doing a nice, really slow revolution for your first time. Totally cool. The other option could be a bit more of a heart rate threshold measure, which would be you do a little bit of a heart rate and then you start to pedal and you just ride until ultimately you feel your symptoms increase by 3 points, which would mean at every kind of minute, you kind of have like a watch set that at every minute, you just kind of close your eyes, you do a little check-in, be like, yeah, I'm good, and you keep going. You might increase the intensity a little bit. So you're kind of doing a sub-threshold test on yourself. Increase the intensity a little bit. You go for another minute to 2 minutes. Minute goes off, quick check-in. Whew, okay, I'm a little bit more dizzy, but less than 1 point. Okay, increase the intensity by a level. Keep going. Next minute rolls in, you check in. Yeah, still at the same, like nothing's changed. Cool, keep going. And then you do that until you do that check-in and you're like, whew, yeah, I'm like at a 3-point increase in my symptoms. So at that point, you want to take note and measure what your heart rate is. Okay, take that number. Then what I want you to do is just write that number down and like set it aside. And then I want you to decrease your intensity. I want you to control your breathing. I want you to palm. I want you to ground. I want you to use your tools, whatever your tools are, to decrease your symptoms. And ideally, those symptoms settle within an hour to an hour and a half. Okay? When that happens, you would take that number and you would multiply it by 60%. You could also, sometimes we'll say 60, sometimes we'll say 70. If you multiply it by 60 or 70%, then that new number is now your target heart rate number, which means the next day, when you come back, our goal is to work up to 25 minutes of exercise at that target heart rate with a minimal increase in symptoms. But they are still allowed to increase to 2 points. Okay. So now there's a couple different ways we can do this. We can aim to do a steady state exercise, which means we're going to get up to that target heart rate, and then we're going to sustain it and continue the activity at pace for as long as we can maintain that heart rate. Okay? Totally fine. We could also try an interval approach, which might actually help elongate our things. So we have our target heart rate. So we still do our warm up. So we're going to get on our bike. We're just going to ground ourselves. We're going to take our breath. We're going to start at just a nice slow pedal to warm our legs up. And then we have our target heart rates, whether you're wearing a heart rate monitor or you're using the monitor on the bike, whatever you're doing. Then after our 5-minute warm up, we're going to do intervals. So we're going to start with 30 seconds on to a minute off. So a 1-to-2 ratio, which means you're going to get up to that target heart rate that you've calculated, or 50%, whatever you're going to do, for 30 seconds. You're going to hold it for 30 seconds. And then at 30 seconds, you're going to ease right off. You're going to keep letting those legs circle, but this is a rest period, and you're now going to chill at this lower intensity for 1 minute. Then at the end of that minute, you're going to set it. So I use a Gym Boss timer, but any sort of interval timer. Then you're going to go back up to the target heart rate for 30 seconds. And then you'll come back down and go slow and controlled for a minute. Back up to that target heart rate for 30 seconds. You get the gist, right? When you're in your slow period, towards the end of your slow period, you're just going to close your eyes or take a breath. You're going to do a quick check-in. How are my symptoms? If we're below a 2 to 3 point increase in symptoms, we get to keep going. If you check in and you're like, whew, I'm a 3-point symptom increase, then I'm going to get you to pause on your pedaling. And I'm going to get you to take your hands. I'm going to get you to palm, which if you don't know what palming is, you're going to put your palms, you're going to make cups with your hands. You're going to put them over your eyes, creating darkness and a seal around your eyes. And you're just going to breathe and slow your breath. If you can bring your symptoms down, then you get to go again. And then you're going to pick up where you left off. So you're going to start with a minute of slow. Then you're going to go into 30-second intervals at the target heart rate. And then come back to our nice slow recovery rate. If your symptoms increase to that 3-point again, then we're done that session at however much time we wrote for. Okay. Our goal is to be able to do this interval period for 30 minutes to start. Okay. That's the goal. When we can successfully achieve it at 30 minutes with a 3-point or less symptom increase, then we get to increase the intensity. So we're going to increase intensity versus increase time. But we get to increase our intensity here in one of two different ways. And there is no right or wrong way to do this. So what I would say to you is play with it and try both and decide which one you want to do. So way number one is we increase the intervals. So instead of doing 30 seconds at the target heart rate and a minute off, we're going to do 45 seconds at the target heart rate with a minute off. That would be the next progression I would do. Option number 2 would be to stay at the 30 seconds at the target heart rate and the minute rest, but that you're going to increase your heart rate. So if we were doing 105 beats a minute, now we might do 110. And when we increase our heart rate intensity, we are increasing by 5 beats per minute. So if we start at 100, we're going to 105. If we're at 105, we're going to 110. You progress when you can consistently achieve 2 to 3 sessions at a target heart rate within that 3-point symptom increase. Okay. It's important to know that this is consistency. And if you haven't done exercise, you will quite likely initially be more fatigued in the beginning. And so sometimes what I say to people is we have this goal of doing this 5 days a week. Why don't we start with a goal of 3 days a week? And literally for those first few days, if you can't do heart rates, just get on the bike and pedal your legs. Literally just get in the habit of getting on the bike or getting to the pool or getting in the water or getting on the treadmill or whatever the thing is going to be for you. Let's actually just get in the habit of doing it. So maybe you're someone who really does need to work into this a lot more. Maybe there is a lot of hesitation associated with it. And so maybe in the beginning, it's for that first couple days, if you need to be really kind to yourself, it's going to be, I'm going to put on my running shoes, I'm going to put on my sweatpants, and I'm going to sit on the bike. And now I'm going to do my somatic tracking exercise because I know I'm safe. And I know my symptoms shouldn't be technically increasing now. And so I know this is a sensitization part and I know I can do this. And so maybe in the beginning, that's how we start. And then maybe it progresses to, okay, I'm going to put on my running shoes, I'm going to put on my workout clothes, and I'm going to start to just actually do a slow pedal. I'm just going to get on the dang bike and move my legs. And then maybe we do that for a couple sessions. And then we move into, okay, now I'm going to work at 50% of my heart rate max. Day 1, here we go. The key is that you show up for yourself. The key is that if you decide you're going to do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever it's going to be, is that now when you're actually looking at your week, mapping out your week, this becomes an appointment with yourself. It is a priority. You decide how much of a priority. If the day comes where you get to choose between going for coffee with a friend or doing your aerobic component and you're at that place where you can only do one of them, you decide what the priority is. But what's incredibly important is as we start to bring a consistent exercise into your life, it takes time and it takes consistency. And if you then go for a period of weeks without doing it, you're going to lose, just like every human being, some of the gains with it. You'll get it back, but you're going to decrease a little bit too. So the key with exercise and persistent concussion is, one, if you've been on this journey and you're not working with a team and you haven't had that multi-systems assessment you hear me preach about all the dang time, and you really are still dealing with some sensory system issues, whether it's your vestibular system or your visual system, please connect with a provider who can support you in that. Number 2, the activity we choose is important. And again, there's no right or wrong. There just may be some that are a bit better given certain contexts and goals. So choosing the right activity is important. Number 3, be really kind to yourself and gentle. This is something we are going to ease into. You're going to build up as you gain tolerance and strength. As you start to do it, leave yourself a day in between. As you start to do it, recognize that you might actually feel more fatigued in the beginning, but that should shift. As you begin to do it, if this is something that you've been struggling with for quite some time, recognize that you might get 5 minutes the first few times, and that's where it starts. That's cool. At least you're doing it. Really general guidelines. Of course, I always say connecting with someone who can help you specifically and give you some more specific information is always a beneficial thing to do. But I hope this gives you some starting points in why certain activities might be more challenging than others, right? When we talk about the bike versus going for a walk in the woods, and the cost benefit to each of those activities. And if both of them serve you, how do you incorporate and balance them in? What I will say as a general rule of thumb is that if you're really trying specifically to focus on the autonomic regulation, exercise, cardiovascular component, is try to choose an activity that ultimately neutralizes as best as possible your other symptoms that you might be struggling with versus choosing an activity that challenges everything. That would be kind of a general rule of thumb, and then start slow. This is also something, exercise and intolerance is something that I can support virtually with, and I know there's other colleagues in the space that can support you virtually with as well. This is one of those ones where we can really help you with some greater insight in between. So I do hope this helped you. If you didn't already know, we are hosting a virtual summit in September. It is going to be amazing. We have, I think, 19 different speakers. We have a track for individuals who are on a healing journey and for clinicians. There's going to be so much information. There is both free and VIP passes. So click the link below so you can join the wait list so you can be the first to know when registration opens and all the details. So again, I hope you found this helpful. It was lovely to connect with you as always. And until next week, my friends, have an amazing day. That's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, give us a like, give us a share, give us a tag on Instagram, and please never hesitate to reach out. We love communicating and connecting with you. Until next week, my friends, have a marvelous day.